So section 9.4. So for this unit, we have had a lot of different tests and a lot of different intervals. So one of the most important concepts that you need to understand is deciding which analysis you should conduct for a particular situation. To help you figure out the analysis to conduct, there are a series of questions you should ask yourself. And so the flow chart here pictures those in the order that you should think about them. So the first decision you should make is whether you have quantitative or qualitative data. So does the problem deal with the mean? If we have quantitative data, we're going to be dealing with the mean. Or does it deal with a proportion, which is what we do when we have qualitative data. So sometimes the problem states explicitly the words mean and proportion, but other times you have to figure it out based on the information you're given. Okay, which is why in most of the homework sets I have you keep by trying to identify the individual object and the variable piece of information, and then classifying that as qualitative or quantitative. So if you count the number of individuals that responded yes to some particular question, then you're dealing with qualitative data and should be looking at a proportion. If you measured or counted something on every single individual, then we've got some quantitative information and we should be looking at the mean. Okay, so I'm just going to put, so the first thing we have to decide here is whether we have qualitative or quantitative data. Okay, once we've decided whether we have qualitative or quantitative data, the next thing we need to decide is whether we have one or two sets of sample data. Now that's really easy to see when we're actually given data. We can just see how many lists of data we have. Okay, sometimes when things are being described to us, we would just have to see, did they describe things for one group or two? Okay, so that's the second thing. All right, the third thing then only comes up independent or paired. So this idea about whether things are independent or paired, we only ask that if we've taken two samples. So this third question is just, if you have two samples, okay, then we need to determine whether the samples are independent or dependent. So again, if the results are from some like before-after study, so those are usually keywords, or a study where two measurements were taken on the same or, didn't leave enough room in that blank, or matched objects. Then you have what we call paired data or dependent samples. Okay, and if it's not that, then they have to be independent samples. All right, and then the last question, so in this last box here, we either have, once we follow through the flow chart and we end up in a box, that box still has two choices. So it's got test and interval. So it just depends on, do we want to test some hypothesis about the parameter, or do we want to estimate the value of that parameter? Okay, so the last thing here is, does the situation involve a hypothesis test or a confidence interval? So if the problem talks about do the data show, or is there evidence of, or test to see, then you're doing a hypothesis test. But if the problem talks about find the value of, or estimate the value of, or find an interval, or specifically mentions confidence interval, then you're going to perform the confidence interval. And on a given problem, so there's been several cases as we've worked through examples here where we've just ran like a two-sample t-test, and then we've turned around and then also did the two-sample